This is a must-watch Q&A. I go over some very hot topics in the music production world that you have to check out in this video. Also, I give some great advice for beginning producers, as well as go over some smaller questions such as emulation EQs, how I use them, and which ones I like. Also, a very huge question that you guys have been asking, how to create an arrangement, a compelling arrangement. I go over that question in this Q&A, so don't miss out. So as far as analog emulation EQs go, you're of course looking for that analog sound with the SSL EQ. I have found that the Pultec EQ suits my needs the best. That is the UAD Pultec EQ that comes with any UAD hardware. Nothing against the SSL. I mean, it sounds great. It's excellent. But I prefer the Pultec EQ. And as far as using analog EQs in general, this is how I go about it. I usually cut frequencies with a digital EQ, mostly Pro Q2, and I boost frequencies with an analog EQ. That's usually how I approach EQing. If anything really needs boosting to bring out a sound, to give it more character, I'll use an analog EQ. So like an SSL, like a Pultec EQ, like a Neve EQ, and I'll cut away frequencies with a digital EQ, because when I'm cutting away frequencies with the digital EQ, or when I'm cutting away frequencies, I really want to subtract. I really want to take away what's there. I don't want to give warmth and character to that area. I just want to take it away. And when I'm boosting, I want the frequencies to be brighter. I want them to be more present. I want them to be warm and sound fatter. So I'll use an analog emulated EQ. That's how I use analog emulation EQs. So whether that be an SSL, Pultec and Neve, Manley, anything like that. That's not to say that you shouldn't subtract frequencies from, with using an analog EQ. I just prefer to use a more precise EQ when subtracting frequencies. So I'm trying to make sure I'm getting exactly what I want out of the mix. So that's how I approach it. So the question here is, do I use presets and samples in my tracks? And really, how do I feel about using samples and presets that other people have made in my music? To me, it is perfectly fine using samples and presets. There's always a big debate, with samples and presets. Oh, it's not mine. I didn't make it, so this is not my music. That simply is not true. You still have to execute your song idea with these samples and presets. Just because you have these samples and presets does not mean you're going to be able to make professional sounding music. If you don't know what you're doing, if you don't know how to construct a song, how to create an arrangement that is compelling, how to mix, then the samples and presets that you use won't be effective. They'll just be cool sounds or a cool little loop. Personally, what I do is I make my own presets, and I'll use a lot of those in my songs. I definitely still use other presets, so I don't just use my own, but I'll like to have separate sound design sessions, and I'll like to make presets for all different types of genres or the style or song that I'm working on or I will be working on, and I'll use those presets when I'm creating. I find that gives me the most creativity because I'm using sounds that I made, so now I know how to manipulate them very easily. This also goes for samples, not as much though. I don't make my own samples too often. I'll make drum hits, I'll layer stuff, I'll make my own music loops, I'll make some pads, some ambient sounds, but I'll usually use third-party, sample packs for that. And the really only knock I have against sample packs is if you're using a bunch of music loops together. So if you have a music loop that's a bass line, that has a melody, that has a chord progression, and you mash that all together and call it your own, I feel that's the only way that I would the only time I would say that's you shouldn't be doing that. You shouldn't be using samples that way, because you're having an entire musical idea being laid out for you, and it's really just copy and pasting at that point. So is that really producing? People say, well, I'm in the DAW. I'm using it. You have to have some sort of creativity and input into the loops that you're designing. There's nothing wrong with having like a melody loop playing, using a melody loop sample and creating, chord progression, a bass line, and everything else around it. Just using a bunch of different musical loops that come together that are in, let's say, a construction kit. So if you're taking a construction kit and just copy and pasting everything over and just adding a few effects and just barely changing around the samples, then I think that's an incorrect use of samples, because you're not making music. It's not music production at that point. So if you're a producer that uses a lot of music loops, be careful with that, because you're missing out on the actual production of music. So be careful using a lot. That's all I have to say about that. But I have no problems against them. I think producers should be using them. Producers who always, and kind of the other side of the spectrum, producers who say, oh, I make all my own samples and I do all my own presets. Who cares? Who really cares? No one cares. The audience doesn't care that you make your own samples and presets. So kind of, get off your high horse. Get off your high horse there. It's okay to use samples and presets. And that's what they're meant for. Get inspiration from other producers. You listen to other songs and take inspiration from other songs. So how is it different than using a preset and a sample and getting inspiration from that? I don't think it's any different. If it inspires you, use it. So, for everyone who makes their own samples, that's great. I mean, you're learning sound design. That's good. But I feel like you're limiting yourself. There's, a whole, world of creativity out there when it comes to samples and presets, and just even a small sample from another sample pack. It can be just as simple as an ambient pad, can really change the course of your entire song and lead you down a different creative path. So using other samples, I would say, is you really should. It's necessary, as well as making your own. I'm a big advocate of making your own also. Do both. Use third-party samples, presets, and make your own. And really, when I'm writing music, I'll do a lot of sample and preset plugging in. I won't make my own samples or presets really when I'm working on a tune, because that's kind of the creative time of the production phase and not the sound design. If I want to sound design later, I'll leave that to the mixing stage or something like that. So that'll be in the later stages. And then finally, I'll have that'll be for the mixing stage. And I just want to be creative when I'm working with samples and presets, or when I'm arranging out my song, when I'm creating my song. And really, sound designing samples and presets during that time will take away from it. And I'll be focusing too much on the sound and not the actual song, and then before I know it, the creativity or spark that I had for that song will be gone, and I won't I'll be out of the creative zone, and I won't be inspired to produce the song, and I will get stuck. It's easier to get stuck in a creative rut when you do that. So use samples and presets. Don't just use all the samples and presets. Don't use a bunch of music loops together, because that's not production. That is not what you call production. That's called copying and pasting. The next question is, I'm a beginning producer and having a really hard time with learning how to mix my songs. How should I improve my mixing? It seems like a lost cause. I remember when I first started out mixing tracks, I was also pretty lost. There's just so many factors to consider. There's just so many plugins, so many options. Even in just your DAW, the stock plugins, there's just so many options for you to mix. You hear all your favorite records, and you're like, I want to have my song sound like that, but you just can't quite seem to get it. above everything else, mixing is about ear training. It's about ear training, about training your ears to know what sounds good. If you don't know that, this bass line is, if you can't hear that a bass line is conflicting with another sound, with the synth, if the synth needs to be bigger in the mix to create, that larger than life sound, if you can't hear that, then you won't be able to mix towards this goal. You always hear your favorite songs like, I want it to sound like that. And then you listen to yours and you don't know how to take it to that next level. You don't know how to take your sound to that because your ears aren't trained to making the right movements in the DAW when you're mixing to get that sound. And the only way to get this is experience. Experience mixing. Going even further, recreating other people's songs. That is probably one of the fastest ways. Mixing your own songs and then mixing or recreating other people's songs. That is the fastest way to learn how to mix. Why? The answers are right in front of you. That professional song, you can hear it. You can hear the sounds in it. You know how it sounds. So the answers are right there to creating that professional song. So recreating it sound by sound as closely as you can. You'll train your ears to know what sounds professional because you're trying to get that sound. You're listening to every specific sound. Okay, this kick sound has a hi-hat on it. It has a very deep low. Let me find a couple samples, layer them together, get it as closely as I can to this sound, mix it in the exact same level as this sound, and do this for every single sound in the song. So that sawtooth layer that you hear, okay, it's very detuned. It's a little bit farther back in the mix. It doesn't have so much side information. It has a little bit of reverb on it. It doesn't have too much mid-range. The mid-range in this is just not that much. It needs more EQing. This is a very time-consuming process recreating other people's songs, but it'll train your ears to know how it needs to sound to be professional and fat in a mix. That is the best way to learn. And then once you have a bunch of different, once you recreate a bunch of different songs, you'll start to see patterns in songs. Not only will this help you with mixing, but it'll also help you with arrangement. With arrangement, you'll know where sounds should go, how they should sound in certain spots of the mix, and this also adds to your mix. Mixing is not just about the actual mixing, EQing, compression, reverb, delay. It's about your arrangement. Your arrangement contributes to the overall mix. So recreating other songs gives you that ability to really get behind the hood of professional sounding tunes and train your ears to know what certain sounds should sound like and how they should be in the mix. So for everyone who's struggling, which is a lot of people, I get messages all the time saying, I don't know how to mix, it's a problem. Recreate other songs. That's the answer. Recreate other songs. It's a very time-consuming process again, like I said, but that's the answer. That's what I have found to work the best. The answers are right there, and then start applying all that knowledge you got from recreation in your own songs. Go back to recreating and mix your own songs. Go back to recreating, mix your own songs. You keep doing that, you have no choice but to get better. You're going to get better. You have to get better. So spend the time to do that and get better. Don't be lazy with this. Do it. Okay. Another question here is how to stay out of a creative rut when you're producing. There are a bunch of different techniques. There are a bunch of different articles. There are just really a lot of information on this. But there's one simple tip that I have not really come across that much in all the articles and videos that I have read and seen. And that is to make a list of what needs to be done in your track. So this really only pertains to, or this is really only applicable to when you get started with the track a little bit. If you only have like a lead line and like a kick drum going, this maybe won't apply to that. You'll need to be a little bit farther along in the track for this technique to be effective. So let's just say I have a verse down. And I'm starting like my build up. That's a good time to start implementing this technique. From there all the way to the finish of the song, this technique will be effective. So that is, once again, writing down what needs to be done, what I need to add. So oftentimes, there's so many things that we're working on in our productions. We can easily get sidetracked, is what I'm trying to say. There's so many plugins, so many different sections of the track to build. You can be hopping from place to place, and having a list of what needs to be done will keep you on track, will keep you focused, and will keep the track moving forward always. So if you're, working on that build up, say, you analyze your song. So how you go about building the list is you analyze your song first. Take a listen to the song. I prefer to bounce out my song and listen to it somewhere else. Listen to it outside. Listen to it when I'm in the car. Anywhere. You can bounce it out of your DAW and just listen to it on your computer. Listen to it on your headphones. Just give yourself a different environment than the actual DAW playing the song. That will just give you a different perspective. When you're in the DAW and making music, it's very repetitive. You're in the DAW. It's there. You need a slightly different mindset. So just bouncing it out will give you that different mindset and help you view the song from, a more, just a different perspective, and help you understand what the song needs, rather than, just hearing the song over and over in the DAW, which could be harder to see what the song needs. So listen to the song and write down what you want to add to it, what it needs to be fixed, what you think could be added. Do that, go through your list, and then do the same process over. Listen to the song, bounce it out, listen to it somewhere else, write down what needs to be done, and go through the list. If you get stuck on something for too long, go on to the next thing on the list. That'll help you stay in the creative zone, help you keep going. And then, when you're working on a song, you could always add new things to this list. You could work on something and get inspired. Oh, this thing, there needs to be a lead following this, a different pattern. Write that down, and then you'll just have another thing on the list to work on and help you stay on track. Very simple, but will work very effectively. Once again, this is a little bit farther down the line in the creation process. You can still implement this early in the creation process, but not at the very, very beginning stages, because everything is needed at that point. If you just have like a kick drum and a snare drum, then you need more musical elements. So that's you have to make that. So once you're a little bit farther along in the process, then start this, and you will be able to stay on track. And you also be cognizant of the time that you're spending on each particular element, and knowing if you're just like overproducing or just trying to make something that's not going to work, that element's not going to work. That's probably one of the best tips I have for progressing with songs that I have found to work. I don't really think I've heard it that often. Maybe I've heard it here and there, but it's not in a lot of the how to beat creativity articles. Next question is, how do I create a compelling arrangement? For creating arrangements, I implement a similar technique to the recreation. I copy a lot of arrangements. Copying arrangements has really allowed me to be more creative in the long run. Of course, if you're copying an arrangement, for your song, once again, I don't think there's anything wrong with that. There are so many arrangements that have been copied over and over, so you're not necessarily reinventing the wheel, trying to recreate something new. You don't have to really reinvent the wheel there. But recreating or just copying other arrangements for my songs has led me to be more creative when I don't copy arrangements of other songs. Let me explain here. If I know, okay, this synth, this kind of like fake out drop that I just made, build up and then goes into something a little more anticlimactic, and then goes into the big drop. If I know that works, if I know, okay, that, bar fill there, that particular section of the arrangement works well, that's, surprises the listener. If I know that filtering this element in and filtering out at this particular time, that sounds good, that works with the arrangement. If I have all these different, ideas from other musicians and their arrangements that work, and I see that they work, and I I kind of more or less recreate them in my songs, then when I'm not looking at anything to copy, I'm just creatively, just in my DAW, just working on a song by myself, I'll have this whole built-up memory of arrangements that work, and I can create a hodgepodge of different arrangements and really make it my own. Really let how my song is coming together dictate what the arrangement should be. You of course always want this to have the sounds that you use, the patterns that you use to dictate how the arrangement is going to go. But once again, that goes back to ear training. You're not sure what exactly sounds good together. You're not sure how these sounds should go together because you don't have as much experience. Or maybe you're trying something new and you're just not quite sure where these should go. So copying other arrangements first and then implementing the different styles of arrangements and creating a sort of hodgepodge arrangement of the other songs that you listened to and liked particular parts of the arrangement, implementing that into your own, I think really works well. That way you can kind of go into any situation in your song and okay, I could try this. That worked in this type of song. This could work here. You'll have that built up memory. Ear training. That's what it is. Experience. There's no one shortcut. Thanks for sticking around for the Q&A, everyone. If you want to get your question on the next Q&A, all you have to do is show up on the Facebook Live video that I run at 12 p.m. Pacific Standard Time on the SoundShock Facebook page. That is 12 p.m. Pacific Standard Time on the SoundShock Facebook page. I run for about an hour and a half, and I answer your questions. So I hope all the advice on using samples and presets was helpful, and you don't get, too caught up in the whole, should I use samples or presets, as well as getting some great tips on how to create a compelling arrangement. And for you beginning producers, I highly suggest you take the advice that I gave on mixing, as I really feel like this is the way to approach it. This is what I have noticed in my experience in producing, from watching other producers, from watching beginners, from intermediate producers to advanced producers. So definitely apply the advice. See you guys next week.